put it like on the wall that okay. And you pour just a little bit of water in there, let it sit and get hot. It was the instructions on the box. I also, at the end, we also got strawberry shortcake and played with the lava and the gymnastics challenge. And you have to go to a different spot in your well, or else you lose a life. You have 3 hearts, and if you step on the lava, you lose one. I was there for 2 actually 2 hours and 30 minutes. I think it was 2 hours.
Oh, okay, play.
Yeah, then when it was time to go, I said, that was good. I felt short.
So you have a different schedule every week?
Sometimes night, sometimes day.
Okay.
I'm working nights, and on nights we do a Friday, Saturday.
Okay.
After I take a few videos and pictures of
Yeah, I'm going back to India again next week.
Okay.
who's gonna change the things to the next one?
You want to do it? Well, I need you to video, so
Actually, I just
you would rather do that?
Yeah.
Ooh. This has make sure your device is turned on.
Let's give it 100 days of Black History, 100 months of Black History, 100 years of Black History. I was given 100 days of Black History, 100 months of Black History, 100 years of Black History.
100 years. It's just a lot easier to do.
Testing, testing. Okay. Hello, hello. All right. Thank y'all so much for being here. It's a little warm, ain't it? Yeah, it done got kind of hot. And I heard it's supposed to be cold again next week. So the weather switching up until it actually starts being more consistent. But thank you all so much for being here. So today we are celebrating 100 years of Black History Month. This month marks a 100th year anniversary of Negro History Week, which has transitioned into Black History Month. And so today, that's what we're going to talk about today, just looking at the history of it. Also, if you came in, if you've never signed the email list, please sign up. That just kind of keeps a roster of, people who's been coming. And then also, you get emails and reminders and all kinds of other things in terms of the class and what we have going on here at ASAALH Institute. And so with that being said, we'll go right into it and I'll let you know how today is gonna go. I always like to start with the introduction of what Black history, or what the class is, the People's African History class. The people means by us and it's for us, which means it's for all Black people, not just some, or not just those that may already have may already be familiar with these topics or what we're talking about. But this is for everybody, right? But it is a class, and this is information that is for people of African descent, right? So we talk about our history and we focus on our history because in regular classes, in regular schools, and schools every day and all around the world and all over your TV and media and radio, they talk about everybody else's history, right? They're talking about everybody else's culture. And this is our time where we talk about all of us, right? And that's okay. And so I just like to make that clear for anybody who comes in. This is what this space is for. But we can't learn about African and African American history without including how we have influenced history all over the world. So obviously we're going to bring in other parts of history and culture, but this focuses on ours, people of African descent. We learn from each other through discussion and sharing of knowledge. So it's not like this is a regular classroom where I'm talking and you're listening and taking notes and preparing for an exam. No, this is where we are all contributing and we're all discussing and talking about things that we may know. You may have questions, you may have answers, right? Or you may just want something I might say may spark something in your mind. And so we're all collectively sharing and learning from each other. The purpose of the knowledge is to uplift all Black people. So no matter what we talk about, whether we're talking about something positive that has happened in our history, or whether it's something negative or something challenging, no group is perfect, right? And so, we want to talk about our history in truth and in honesty, talk about the things that we've done that have been uplifting and empowering. We're going to talk about some of the mistakes that we made and things that we've done, things that have happened in the past that we want to do better and improve upon in the future. And really, that's all we're asking for America to do, not to shame themselves or not to big up themselves, but to just be honest and truthful about history. That's all we've always asked of America. That's all what we've always asked of the larger power structures. But unfortunately, they don't want to do that. So we're going to do that ourselves, and we're going to do that for our children and our people and create spaces where we teach our history, because we can't demand anybody else to do something for us that we won't do for ourselves, right? So we have to do that for ourselves. So again, feel free to raise your hand, join in the discussion, and just understand that we are talking about Black history from Africa to the United States and all the way around the world.
So,
Child,
so on your symbol, you have something I have a question about. So either it could be like the Star of David, which I imagine maybe it'd be the Star of David if you're saying that, or if you're part of the conversation that or is it the fruit of life that comes from the flower of life?
right. So no, it does look like a Star of David, but it's not. It's just my homeboy who designed the company symbol for me. He was kind of doing a pyramid, and so he just did a pyramid pointing up and then a pyramid pointing down. Okay. So it's really supposed to symbolize or reflect pyramids and ancient African culture and that kind of thing. So that's what it looks like. But when I first saw it, I said, "Oh, people don't think this is a Jewish group." Yeah. Yeah.
Before you get started, I want to mention on something, but I need you, if you kind of would, just go back to the previous slide. I want to commend you on putting in that tapestry piece right there on the left side. The reason why I say that is because the tapestry is visibly and visually African. That speaks to who we are, regardless of geography, today or yesterday. It says that we're African, even without mentioning the words Black or African. And so our symbols visually need to speak to ourselves, speak to others, and give vision about who we are as people that may not be spoken. And I want to commend you for putting that there, because a lot of times people think that it's not to announce Black, announce African, but African seemingly should be what people visually embrace and what they internally digest. I think that's powerful. I want to commend you for that. People miss those statements sometimes, even when they hear Black history. They embrace, but our culture should embed race on multiple. That's my thought.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much. Oh, yes, don't forget to sign the sign-in sheet, either as you come in or as you leave. You all, they know things that I don't know, they know things you don't know. And then obviously we're only here for about 2 hours, so we can't cover everything. So if I miss something or if I state past something, you want to talk about it further, we can elaborate, we can, move further. This isn't a set curriculum or anything like that. I do have kind of like a layout and a lecture plan, but what they say in a Black church, we just let the Spirit move. So sometimes the Spirit may move us in another direction, and that's okay, right? So that's fine. Feel free to share your knowledge of what you have or what you may know with the group, and we're all here to learn and grow together. So just a quick review of last time. We talked about the life of enslaved people in the United States. So that's where we did like a part 1 and a part 2 of that. And so we talked a little bit about the abolitionist movement. We talked about William Lloyd Garrison, Harriet Tubman, William Wells Brown, and many of the Black abolitionists who started this movement, and the white abolitionists and the white allies who helped to kind of bring it to the mainstream. And so we talked a little bit about that. We talked about Nat Turner and Nat Turner's revolution in 1830 that made Southerners mad, increased slave control, but it also increased the number of abolitionists and people who fought for and who demanded their freedoms during this time. And so we talked about various revolts and revolutions that happened during that time, the Free African Society and the AME Church, and the starting of that, how these institutions like the family, as well as the Black church, came out during slavery. And so a lot of times when we see movies and documentaries and TV shows or whatever about slavery, it's always the bad and the negative things, the raping and the beating and all of this, and all of a sudden, white folks came and the Civil War and it was free. But not much is ever talked about the institutions and the culture, the Black culture that came out of slavery, that we created out of the situation that we were in, that has now influenced the entire world. The music, the food, the institutions, the Black church, the Black family, all of these things were things that we created despite our conditions. And so that is those are just a couple of things that we talked about. Then we also talked about the notion of reparations. We talked about Queen Mother Moore, because when we talk about slavery, it's not just about what happened in the past. There's things about the enslavement process, there's things about our history as enslaved people that still affect us today, right? They still affect us today. All right? Thank you. Yeah, you can put my arm off on this side. Queen Mother Moore, right, was one of the sisters, a friend of Marcus Garvey, who helped to kind of start that movement of reparations, right, and start that, or helped to advance the movement of reparations. Reparations was talked about for a long time, even prior to Queen Mother Moore, right? Even prior to Queen Mother Moore, and all the way up until right around the time, I think she passed away shortly after the Million Man March, she was still fighting for our reparations. So, thank you. All right, Mom. Oh, all right, so I think that is it for the review. And so now we will move on to today's lesson. So again, we are celebrating 100 years of Black history. We're celebrating 100 years of Black history. And so today, what we're doing, I told y'all I had a surprise for y'all last time. Y'all remember that? Okay, so today, every attendee of this class gets one free item from Cafe Resistance, menu sponsored by Ashe Institute. And then also, we have a cake at the end of our session. We have a cake. It's actually really nice. Did y'all see it coming in? I don't know if y'all saw it. It's really nice. But there's a cake really that has this logo on it. And it basically says celebrating 100 years of Black history. It was brought to us by a Black-owned cake company here in Jacksonville, Sugar Rush by Brittany. So if you want to follow her, you can, and support her. So at the end of this session, we're gonna have cake. Everybody gets a free item from the Cafe Resistance menu, and we'll just kind of use this time to celebrate 100 years of Negro History Week and Black History Month. So that's what we're doing today. I know we wanted a barbecue. Maybe we could do that one next year when I got a little more money. We can put together a little barbecue or something. All right, so the takeaway. In 1926, Carter G Woodson launched a week-long celebration of Black history in the United States. And then in 1976, President Gerald Ford officially recognized Black History Month. Right, so these are just like the key takeaways. I try to have some key takeaways just in case people have to leave early, different things like that. So, yeah, we're going to go into detail with this topic. And then Black History Month, while we celebrate it here in the United States, Black History Month, African American History Month. This is something that now is celebrated all over the world. We're going to talk about that later. It really didn't start and really take hold until the 80s and around the 90s. And in some countries, well into the 2000s, did they start celebrating Black history. But now, Black History Month is celebrated all over the world. So, also I'm going to kind of ask some questions to you because a lot of this stuff you may already know. But I also want us to kind of think through our own journey into Blackness, our own journey into Black history and identity. And we all started from somewhere, right? Many of us didn't just, or none of us came out the womb knowing these things, or maybe being interested in it. Maybe it was our parents who instilled these ideas and this pride that we have. Maybe it was a teacher, maybe it was music, I don't know, maybe it was art. Who knows, right? Not really sure where your start was, but I think this would be a great time just to kind of talk about that together. So, how did you come to understand who you are as a Black person is the question I have for you. And as you're thinking about your story, I'll share mine real quick. I know for me, I was taught by my parents at an early age. They always bought books and stuff home, and they were very big on knowing who you are and being proud of who you are. They didn't really kind of go as far as I have with it, but just kind of a basic level of don't let anybody tell you you can't do something because of the way you look. So that was always instilled in me and my sister, but it was really my aunt who went to school out at the University of California, and she went there during like the whole time of a lot of the Black arts movement and a lot of the things that were happening on college campuses in California. And she was there during the Rodney King, during the LA riots, right? So she did a lot of writing, and she was an artist and a stand-up comedian and all of these things. So she brought a lot of that information back to Florida when I was young in the early 90s, and she began to teach me and my cousins all of this information. And so I kind of used that to kind of start learning on my own and build my own culture and my own identity. And that, not only through her, but also through hip hop and all these different things were the ways in which I started to come into my own identity as a Black person and my appreciation for my culture and my history. So with that being said, anybody else you want to talk about this? Yes.
I came into my
Yes.
I came into my understanding of myself. I believe I was like 15, and the Robert Kennedy Center on the east side of our street in Jacksonville was a social center. We had all kind of programs in and out of that organization, and I remember getting involved in the sickle cell anemia program. As a matter of fact, I was in a youth program. We went around the city and we did sickle cell anemia testing. And so it was in the Robert F. Kennedy Center where I attended certain groups. I can't call their names, I was going so long ago, but it was those groups that helped me understand who I am as a person. And I remember very well when I was 16 years old and I had shoulder length hair, and I decided then that I wanted to be natural. And I'm 70 years old now, and I'm still natural. And I just remember the reaction that a lot of the neighborhood, as you can imagine, and my mother was like to have a heart attack. But it was at that time when I remember Dr. Muslim religion and Martin and Malcolm and others like history icons. I just decided at that time in reading Malcolm's works, when he impressed me that I was to be not a person who was the rule. I was to be the exception. You are not to be the rule, you are to be the exception. Because America, by the time your child is 8 years old, America administration decides right then and there how many schools they will build and how many prisons they will build. And I had to be a teenager when that impressed me. They're gonna build so many prisons by the time you're 8 years old, and when you're 8 years old is when they take you into the auditorium and give you all these tests. That's exactly why they do it. That's why they do all these tests. So it was that really impressed me that I wanted to be the exception. I did not want to be the rule. And the rule is I would have babies from different men. I live in the projects. I would go any further. I even had a counselor in my senior year tell me that I was not college material, etc. And I've gone on to have a master's in education. I have quite a few certifications, and I'm also a podcaster. Yes, I have a podcast. I'll talk about that some other time. But I have a podcast as well, Two Sisters in a Pod. So I learned about my Black heritage at the Robert F. Kennedy Center on Alma Street, East Jacksonville.
All right,
Thank you.
nice, thank you. Anybody else?
Okay, so it's interesting how we have phrased that question, how to come to understand who you are. The way I translate that myself, not so much that you were labeled as a Black person by race, but what does that mean in application? Okay, so for me, what that meant in application, that you that you were a Black person, meant to me that you were an outgrowth of Africa in reference. No matter where you live in the world now or what the century it is. So having said that, there's two aspects I want to point out in life. One is that I was brought up in the Asian church. So just the fact of being church, being African, as the first word, African, that automatically said that this was a place of worship to African people. The second, I want to point out a coloring book that I received very early in it's called African Children of the World. Great coloring book. You want to check that coloring book out. It's still available. It was the only coloring book or the only book actually, that was published by an organization called the Drum and Spear Press in Washington, D.C. Mainly people who ran a bookstore also called the Drum and Spear Press. Were connected to Howard University. But in this coloring book, it explains where various African people live. It contrasts Mississippi, contrasts places in the Caribbean, it contrasts various countries in Africa, saying that these children are all the same, who live in different spots. So for that, those are two main things that solidify in my mind that any Black person is African, irrespective of the geography now or then or the centuries that follow.
And hold the mic up. I'm gonna make sure they can hear you on the live.
Where did I find out, or how did I come to understand who I am as a Black person? Growing up, I had a family that lived in Mississippi, predominantly. They moved up during the Great Migration to the Chicago area, Milwaukee area. So a lot of that history was still in my family as I was coming up. And they had me sit down. I was somewhere around the age of 10, maybe a little younger, a little older, and I watched Hidden Colors on the living room computer. So I watched that once as a kid, not understand it. A couple years later, my granddad said, "Hey, sit down, watch this," and I watched it again. A couple years later, "Hey, sit down, watch it," and I watched it again. So little by little, as I grew, I was also watching this mini series and came to a certain understanding of what it means and what it looks like. And irrespective of our society's outlook, what it looks like and what it means to truly just be Black African. So that's why it was Hidden Colors originally.
Yeah, I guess. Anybody else?
When my uncle started teaching me every weekend since I was like 5 to 8 or 9 about different things about African history, African American history, like Benjamin Banneker and Frederick Douglass, things like that. And then when I moved my father from like 9 to 14, he used to do drugs, drink, and read the Holy Bible and the Quran at the same time. And as I would walk by, he would make correlations like this Black person in the Bible and this Black person in the Holy Quran. And then he would also watch movies like Malcolm X and a movie called Panther that was made in the 90s. And since like the last 15 years, I've been self-educating myself and delivering packages out of state. Every state or city I go to, I look up Black history and go to different sites. Martin Luther King House, Lorraine Hotel, Medgar Evers House, Malcolm X grave, 16th Street Baptist Church. Been to a lot of places, and I've been basically knowing knowledge of self since 5 and 6.
I think for me, it became, it developed in waves, for lack of a better term. I grew up in a city that was becoming all Black, elected a Black mayor, the first Black mayor in 1968, who would have been the first Black mayor of a major industrial area, except for the fact that Gary was on Central Time, Cleveland was on Eastern Time. Cleveland elected Carl Stokes an hour later, so they were an hour ahead of us. An hour later, when our poll was supposed to be elected Richard Hatch. So I ended up going to what I call an HBHS, Historically Black High School. So we were always doing Black History Month and kind of Afrocentric things at that time. We had Good Times and the Jeffersons on TV. So no matter where you went, there was something going on. But in school, the teachers would do more than just teach the ABCs. They would also give you a couple of life lessons. And they would tell you that there are certain people in this world that don't expect you to present yourself well. They don't expect you to sound like you're educated, and you need to meet that and exceed that. I had one teacher that would always say, "Don't be a white man's hero." We're like, "What the heck are you talking about?" He said, lazy, shuffling, committing crimes, all that stuff. That's not what you want to do. That you want to be somebody that everybody in the community can be proud of. We moved south to Alabama. That got me, and my mother is originally from there, so she said a few things about it. My father was a big historian, so that's why I kind of picked up the bug. We moved to Alabama. I had a chance to live in Selma, where I saw the Edmund Pettus Bridge up close. I had a chance to go to Brown Chapel AME Church, where they used to hold the rallies before the Voting Rights March. But at this time, it was the 20th anniversary of the march. I'm in the chapel. Here comes Jesse Jackson. Here comes Richard Valeriani, who worked for NBC News, who back during the Selma Montgomery March, he was trying to do a live shot and somebody whacked him in the head with an axe handle. And he told that story. Joseph Lowery was there. Almost everybody who was anybody in the movement was there. And I'm like, holy cow, this is real. Then just outside of town, they had a monument for a white woman from Michigan, Viola Liuzzo, who told her family, her husband and her kids, said, I'm going to Selma because there are things going on there and I cannot sit back and do nothing. And at the end of the voting rights march, she would drive people back to Selma. And of course, the Klan got wind of it and they shot her in her car with another passenger in there. So I had a chance to, kind of see all these remembrances all up front. And then as time went by, I kind of got rekindled again, like classes like this, with sessions like this, and doing some other things. So I don't know if the idea of who you are as a Black person, I think for me it's still developing. I think I sort of had a strong sense, but I always get a renewal every few years.
Thank you, sir. What was that lady's name you said?
Viola Liuzzo. Liuzzo. I think that's the way it's spelled. You might be able to look it up for FBI, because that was the case when President Lyndon Johnson found out about that case. Oh, he was hopping mad. He had, what was his name that used to be the czar of the FBI? J. Edgar Hoover. He had J. Edgar Hoover in the office, and he jacked him up. He said, you get to the bottom of this, or else, I don't know if people care whether you wear high heels and a skirt at night, but they don't know about it. They found those guys and made some arrests. That kind of brought Lyndon Johnson front and center into the movement when that woman was murdered.
For me, it was a collective energy thing. Being introduced to reading early, having an interest in books. My mother, and strong influence from the Nation of Islam, and eventually, through my love for reading, going to lectures like some of the other scholars like Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, and others, and one book that stood out that grasped my interest, and which today marks the day that he joined the ancestors, Malcolm X, on this day in 1965. That book touched my heart. But it was a number of scholars, and watching a number of influential, and listening to a number of influential Black people who have worked mainly in Newark, New Jersey, and New York.
If no one else has a weigh-in exactly on the question that you asked Dr. Grant, I would like to ask you a question that gave your insight. Okay, so can you explain for me what is the difference in history and heritage, since all of the major celebrations, at least in this country, all have the word heritage in it, but the Black History Month is one that has history, everybody else has heritage. So I'd like to know the difference between those two words. And then secondly, I would like to know what is the difference in Black and African, given that Black seems to be racially charged, but African seems to be cultural. So that whenever Black history happens, it is the Black part that is racial, but African is never attached, even down to the fact that most white colleges have African studies programs. African studies programs are never attached, always Black studies. The case of Wayne, University of Florida, offers 8 African languages. And it's poised to be one of the top schools in the United States regarding African studies, and I'm adding more. So I would like to ask those questions of you. Fair enough?
Yes. All right, so thank you all for sharing your stories. I just thought it'd be interesting to kind of kind of understand, each of our origin stories, because we're all here for a reason. All of us have our own individual history and our own individual connection to these topics and to our culture. So thank you for engaging in that way. To answer your question, I think the first question, I can't remember word verbatim, but it had to do with the difference between Black History Month or the usage of the word history versus the word heritage, like Hispanic Heritage Month, etc. Asian Heritage Month, etc. And I think it's quite interesting when we say that, because when we think about Black History Month, and we're going to talk about this in a second, it stems from the notion of Negro History Week, right? And so that was something that was started by Carter G Woodson and the group of what we now know as ASAALH. That organization did that to help instill and secure not only the history, but also the culture of African and African American people, particularly within the U.S. context, right? That is the reason why it was started, and that is the reason why it continues to exist, right? And then, of course, over time, we'll see that at Kent State University was the first time it kind of on a large scale. It was already, Black History Month had actually existed since the 1940s, right? 1940s, we're going to talk about that in a second, but it wasn't until 1970, 1971, at Kent State University in Ohio, was it celebrated on like a larger scale, this notion of Black History Month. And then, but the idea of heritage, I think, is interesting because, and it could be, again, I haven't done the research as to why there's this distinction. It could be that the idea of Negro History Week going into Black History Month exists just more as a continuation of tradition, right? As opposed to the heritage part, celebrating these other groups of people that have integrated into U.S. history, into U.S. culture, largely through voluntary migration, right? And so there could be this idea, right, that when we talk about Black history or Negro history, we're talking about our story and how it is infused in the larger U.S. American story that has been purposely silenced and purposely sanitized, wherein the heritage of these other groups that are, again, a part of the American story doesn't necessarily go back as far, and again, a lot of those migrations were voluntary. Those histories may be linked to outside sources, right, or outside native lands, wherein a lot of times for African American people, and I think this kind of speaks to what the brother, consistently brings up of us connecting ourselves to Africa, you still do have a lot of African Americans or a lot of Black people that may not want to connect their identity or connect themselves back to Africa, and so they believe that a large part of their history or their identity or their culture comes directly from the Americas, right? And so I think it's that kind of distinction and that very distinct African and African American story in the U.S. versus the story of other minority groups. That distinction may also play out in the idea of Black History Month versus Hispanic Heritage Month, right? I also think, if I'm going to be slightly a skeptic, if you will, there is this idea that we are always celebrating history, not us, but America, white America likes to celebrate what we've done in the past and not necessarily help to influence and support what we're doing presently. So there's always this kind of look at, we're going to keep looking at the past, keep looking at the past, keep being part of your past. And one of the things I want us to do today is also talk about the present. Black History Month is Black history, past, present, and future, right? And that's something that we always have to make sure that we're thinking about, is that Black history is constantly being made today. Black history is in our children. It's in everything that's happening, right? Things that are happening in 2026 is Black history. So it's not just about the past. And then you also asked the question about
being African cultural, but black?
Oh, but black is racial, right? And so the idea of black oftentimes encapsulates. Some people look at it as encapsulating people of African descent. Other people look at black as just being African American. That's synonymous with African American. So they'll say many people, particularly our African brothers and sisters or Caribbean brothers and sisters, will say, "Oh, this African American, or this black person, or this black American." But then when they speak on people across the other parts of the world, they will speak to their where they're from, right? So their ethnicity. And oftentimes that's because many times they can trace it and they know their ethnicity. Many of us as African Americans may not know where we are from on the continent of Africa. And so obviously many of us may know, we'll talk about this in some lectures later. We have had a naming process where we were colored, and then we went from colored to being Negro, and we went from Negro to being black, and then we went from black to being African American, and then from African American, now we kind of, vacillate between African American and black in the present day. And so we've had this kind of identity crisis, if you will, or have been going through this identity journey for a while because we were taken away from where we were originally, and we have had to make up history and culture and identity as we go, as opposed to many other minority groups and other people across the diaspora. They have had that privilege of being able to know exactly where they are from and where they originated. And so that could be, again, this distinction. I do think that there is no universal definition necessarily of black, because being black, and as we know, being a part of the African American history, we are not a monolith. So different people have different definitions, but I think that is one process in which we look at it. So thank you for that question. I want to go ahead and go into what we're going to talk about today. Carter G. Woodson is considered to be the father of Black history. He was born in New Canton, Virginia in 1875. And just to give some context, I'm just pulling up my notes here, but just to give some context, this was 10 years after the 13th Amendment was abolished. The 13th Amendment was put in place to abolish slavery. And so Carter G. Woodson was born in the South. Sorry. And his grandparents had been enslaved. His grandparents were enslaved, and he worked as a sharecropper and a miner to help his family make money and to help his family survive. He eventually taught himself how to read in his spare time, and after he taught himself how to read, he eventually graduated from Berea College. He didn't start going to school until much later because he had to work, because he was a sharecropper, and so he kind of graduated from high school and college a little later than the traditional time. But he earned his bachelor's and master's degree from the University of Chicago, and then eventually earned his PhD from Harvard in 1912. And he was the second Black American to earn a PhD from Harvard. Can anybody tell me who the first one was? W.E.B. Du Bois. Okay, I see. W.E.B. Du Bois was the first one. Carter G. Woodson was the second person to get a PhD from Harvard. Woodson held down several positions in academia. I believe he was a dean at one point. He was an instructor. He was a principal. He worked at Howard University. And then we're going to definitely talk about everything he contributed in terms of Black History Month and Negro History Week. But he eventually died in 1950 at the age of 74. He's also remembered through the Carter G. Woodson Institute at the University of Virginia, in the same state he was born in, as well as the Carter G. Woodson African American Museum in St. Petersburg, Florida. So these are just a few of the institutions that actually have his name and specialize in preserving Carter G. Woodson's history. So if you ever get a chance to go down to St. Petersburg, definitely check out that Carter G Woodson African American Museum. Some of his writings, the one that most of us know is what? Miseducation of the Negro. Many of us may have read that in our own journey into consciousness and our own journey into Black identity. It's a very, very popular text and has become required reading for many colleges and universities. But he also wrote other texts like A Century of Negro Migration, The History of the Negro Church, and The Negro in Our History. And so this is one clip or taking from one of his texts. And this talks about, or this says, Dr. Woodson was, all in all, tremendously effective in helping to improve the self-respect of Negroes, young and old, and giving them a brighter, more optimistic outlook. At the same time, he was a force in helping white people view Blacks with more appreciative eyes. While his contribution, due to his very nature, has not received the wide publicity of that of certain other Negroes, it is nonetheless deep and enduring. So, how did this idea, or how did Negro history get started? All right. The story of Black History Month started in Chicago during the summer of 1915. And so it was in the summer of 1915, Carter G. Woodson traveled from Washington, D.C. He was probably the dean of Howard University at the time, to participate in this national celebration. I think it was like the 15th anniversary at the time, but there was this national celebration that had been going on where they were celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation. And so thousands of African Americans were in Illinois at this time, and they traveled from across the country to see all of these various exhibits that were highlighting Black history and highlighting the progress that Black people had made since slavery. So Woodson joined many of these other exhibitions, and he just kind of started looking around and he became inspired. And despite being held at this Coliseum, the site of the 1912 Republican Convention, there was this overflow crowd of 6,000 to 12,000 people that waited outside, and they were inspired by this 3-week celebration of Black history and culture since emancipation. And so Woodson had decided to take this idea, he saw this and he was inspired by it, and so he decided to take this idea and create an organization to promote the scientific study of Black life and history before leaving town. So before he left Illinois, he decided in his mind that he was going to create what we now know as ASAALH, the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. And they have a chapter here in Jacksonville if you want to look it up and be involved. Let me see. So on September 9th, Woodson met at the YMCA with a brother by the name of A.L. Jackson and 3 other people, and they started what we know as ASAALH, or the Association for the Study of African, well, they called it Negro Life and History, and now we call it African American Life and History. So as early as around 1920, Woodson urged Black civic organizations to promote the achievements and the research uncovering what Black people had done in and around the United States. And because he was a graduate of a Divine Nine organization, does anybody know what organization he was a part of? What Black Greek organization he was a part of?
Alpha.
Not Alpha. That was Dr. King. Omega Psi Phi. He was a part of Omega Psi Phi. And so because he was a part of Omega Psi Phi, he urged his fraternity brothers to take up this work and to spread this word of this organization that he was starting that was promoting the scientific study of Black people, right, and of African American history. And so it started off kind of slow. They weren't really into it at first, but he kept pushing, and finally they started to put their weight and their influence behind him. And in 1924, they responded with the creation of Negro History and Literature Week. And then they renamed it Negro Achievement Week in 1925. And then he decided that the association needed to shoulder this responsibility going forward. And so he sent out a press release announcing in 1926 sent out a press release announcing in 1926 in February that we would officially, as a race, start celebrating Negro History Week. And so the first Negro History Week started in 1926. And how do you think people responded when they saw this?
Which people?
Black people.
Yeah.
Not really. Everybody was kind of like, oh, okay. It started out slow. And the reason why I wanted to say that is because anytime you're doing something, or I don't want to say anytime, but most times when you're doing something positive or doing something that is going to,
That's new or innovative.
yeah, that's new, that's innovative, it's probably going to start slow. People may not catch on. It may take a while for people to really get behind you. So don't get discouraged, right? If you have an idea, or if you have something that you want to do, and if you start it today or next week, and within the first month or even the first year, it's still not getting legs, don't get discouraged, because the first week, again, it wasn't that people weren't interested, they just didn't know, or it was something new. And so it took a while for people to really catch on, but eventually he started to gain the cooperation of different departments, particularly from states in the South, and as well as Delaware, and I believe Baltimore, New York City, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C. started to take note of what Woodson was pushing, and eventually started to celebrate Negro History Week.
All right, you were talking about, things catching on and how people react. Just go back a few years to Black Lives Matter.
Sure.
Because as soon as they said, defund the police, everybody was, oh God, here we go.
Right.
And they didn't mean get rid of the police. Their dream was it just needed to be reshaped and reorganized.
Absolutely.
And people in other parts of town, see, they're anti-law enforcement. But how many times have you, since then, how many times have you heard MAGA folks going, oh, we need to defund the FBI, we need to defund these other things. But when Black Lives Matter first said it, how come only Black Lives Matter?
Right.
I don't know if you remember that, but it was kind of wild.
Oh yeah, and I mean, defund the police is very, it's very clear. They didn't say abolish the police. There are some people who believe in abolishing the police,
Right.
but it's very clear. They just said defund it, which means take that money and move it to community programs. Right?
So should we defund the ICE or abolish it?
Well, that's a conversation we can open up later. It's definitely a conversation we can open up. I thought I saw another hand. Oh, yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry.
No, no.
You were talking about
You want to sit down? I want some chairs.
Negro to color, from nigger to color to African American. Now there's the Foundation of Black Americans.
Yeah, they got this, and right before FBA, that's what they call it, Foundation of Black Americans. And then before that, a couple of years ago, there was the movement of ADOS. There was that movement. I mean, I don't really have a feeling one way or another, because I don't know the details of what this new identity name comes from. This idea of us calling ourselves FBA, Foundation of Black Americans, I'm not really sure.
Well, from my understanding, is because so many Africans from the diaspora don't consider us home people.
Right. As African.
As Africans.
Right.
So that term came about. So we're here. We write some things that you all have because Foundation of Black Americans.
Sure, absolutely.
Went out and fought in the civil rights. So that's where it came from.
Right.
So we're trying to distinguish. I've been here since the beginning of time, never lived in Africa. I'm the Foundation of Black Americans. I don't necessarily use the term. That's where it came from. I just want you to know your thoughts.
And I mean, personally, I think it is, I kind of agree in many ways with what the brother has been saying, when he says every class, that we should connect ourselves to Africa. So again, for me personally, I like to call myself African American or African, because I do believe in my connection to Africa and to the motherland. Again, like I was saying before, as Black folks, we are, not monolithic. There's so many different identities and ways of thinking, schools of thought in our racial group and in our community. you know, but personally, I do believe and I do connect myself to Africa and like to call myself African in that way. So,
So my first reaction to this conversation is that all of these groups, the ASAALH movement, Black First movement, the FBA movement, are all movements that benefit white supremacy. They all try to make sure that Black people here are separated from Africa, while all of white people's resources and ideas are that Africa is the place of resources for their survival. So I'm sure that all the white supremacists are now clapping for the ASAALH movement, the FBA movement, now such that you've got people like right-wing supremacists, like people like Tucker Carlson, who are now saying, you know what? The FBA movement has a lot of valid points. As they continue to talk about what a heritage American is and what America is in general as a white person. So all of these movements are white supremacy based, and these movements also got started with the idea that if reparations are going to be given, it has to be a delineation. Make sure that nobody from the so-called African diaspora gets any reparations from what supposedly Black people are getting here. That's where it started.
that's a good point.
Also, I've also heard, I'm on TikTok, a lot with TikTok lives, and a lot of people get on there and kind of do what we do here in class just on TikTok. So then on the other side of that, you have people that get on the live and kind of express their point of view. So a lot of the times you do have this kind of FBA versus or whatever, right? My point of view on it, it seems like it stems from a certain lack of, trying to find a good way to say it, a certain lack of self-love, the way I'll put it, because there seems to want to be this like major delineation as African Americans from Africa. No, we're not them, you know. And it happens the other way across as well, but there's this big thing of, that's not my history. They didn't do that to my people. We were over here doing this thing. I don't want that part. To some extent, I get it. You don't want that to be your kind of your baggage to carry, but again, from what I've seen, that seems to be the biggest part of it is a certain lack of love for self. Is the way I put it. So it's just my personal opinion on it.
Yeah. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
I have two questions. My first question, just listening from what I heard when I came in, am I to understand that Africans over in Africa do not consider us African Americans as African? Because we don't know the point where we came from? Is that what I'm to understand?
So I in my experience with African people, both on the continent as well as in the Americas, a majority of them, when they understand our history and the story, many of them do look at African Americans as part of them, as part of their history, part of their culture. While there are thousands of different cultures and thousands of different ethnic histories on the continent, when I've gone over there, there has been an embracing of African American culture and our history alongside them. Some people have argued it's for economic reasons. Some of them say, oh, well, they know that you're coming with money and they want you to spend your money and they want you to be happy in tourism and all of that. Not really sure what anybody's individual reasons are, but I can only speak from my experiences being here and abroad. I've had very good experiences with African people having a connection with African Americans, those that are conscious and those that understand the history. But of course, you do have many that like to separate themselves from other groups within the diaspora, including African Americans. And so I can't say that it's an all or none situation. I do believe that it's individualized. I do believe that it does depend on the group of people that you're interacting with. Because again, when you talk about the country of Ghana has a very smooth passport to citizenship from African Americans into citizenship, and they allow for African Americans who, again, create citizenship in Ghana to buy land, to get an education, because they understand, many of them, they have a history of course, with Kwame Nkrumah, having a history of understanding that connection between African and African American people. So, but then you have other countries that don't, and so we gotta, it differentiates depending on who, right? I'm sorry, guys, I want to run through this and then I'm gonna get to the next part, but keep that in mind after I finish this slide. Why February? You said it's the shortest month. Okay. They gave us the shortest month. They always try to play us. Why February? Why did Woodson choose this one?
It's because of tribute to Frederick Douglass' birthday.
Okay, a tribute to Frederick Douglass' birthday. Okay, anybody else? Why do you think we celebrated this preservation of history and culture in February? Okay, and intersected with Lincoln's birthday. All right. So the reason why, I know a lot of us do say it's because it's the shortest month. They try to play us, but that's really Woodson chose February, right, as the month to celebrate Negro History Week and then eventually Black History Month, because it was a part of a long-standing tradition that existed among Black folks at the time. So at the time, again, this was not the first time that we were celebrating our culture and history in mass, on a large scale. We just talked about this big convention that happened in 1915 that Woodson attended, where there were thousands of Black folks coming in to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation and to show the progress that we had made since our times of enslavement. And so we were already celebrating Frederick Douglass' birthday, and as a people, we were celebrating Abraham Lincoln's birthday. I didn't put a picture of Abraham Lincoln up here. I ain't gonna really put too many white people on my slide, but we all know what Abraham Lincoln looked like, right? So, but it was a celebration of Frederick Douglass, and I also put a picture of Mary Church Terrell on here because, again, to show that there was this institutionalized and organized way of celebrating Black history before Carter G Woodson came along. Mary Church Terrell was a school teacher in Washington, D.C., and she persuaded the Washington, D.C. school board to set aside one afternoon to celebrate Frederick Douglass' birthday and teach about Frederick Douglass, even during this time where the city schools were segregated, right? So Mary Church Terrell helped to kind of, move this event along. So that is why this is important, and that is why February it was the month that was chosen. And so when Carter G Woodson started Negro History Week, he didn't want to change it up. He was like, we already celebrating in February anyway. We already celebrated Frederick Douglass's life. We're already celebrating Abraham Lincoln's because both of their birthdays was in that month. So let's just continue on. So it was really mainly out of tradition.
Mr. Speaker, I move that we change Black History Month to start at January 15th. So we go from the King holiday all the way into the middle of February. We still honor what Carter G had begun, but I think it gives us a little more, it gels it together, and plus we get 2 months out of the deal.
Okay, all in favor say aye. Opposed? It's carried. Let's go. Black History Month now starts January 15th and ends December 31st. All right. So Carter G Woodson said, if a race has no history, it has no worthwhile tradition. It becomes a negligible factor in the thought of the world, and it stands in danger of being exterminated. The American Indian left no continuous record. He did not appreciate the value of tradition, which I kind of disagree with. But I see what he's saying. And where is he today? The Hebrew keenly appreciated the value of tradition, as is attested by the Bible itself. In spite of worldwide persecution, therefore, he is a great factor in our civilization. So Carter G. Woodson was big on the fact that if we don't understand and teach and reinforce our history in ourselves and in our children, as a people, we will be extinct. Not only that, but we give other people the room to tell us who we are. We give other people the room to tell us where we come from and give us their story, right? And many of you may be familiar with the African proverb or the African saying. I'm not going to say it verbatim, but basically it says that the lion's story will always be told from the perspective of the hunter until the lion begins to tell his own story. The lion will always be the prey. The lion will always be the victim if the hunter is always telling the story. Eventually, the lion has to tell his own story for him to be the king, for him to be the leader. And so, in this same respect, we have to tell our history, and we have to make sure that we have control over our culture and our identity. So we talked about how Black History Month, Negro History Week was started or continued in February based on the birthdays of the two men in the celebration of Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln. But Carter G. Woodson said that this is not just about two men. This is not just about Frederick Douglass, or this is not just about Abraham Lincoln. Woodson was up to something much more than just building tradition. And without saying so, he looked to reform it from the study of just these two men to studying Black people as a whole and Black people worldwide. So Woodson believed that history was made by the people, not simply by just two great men or just men in general. And so he envisioned the study and the celebration of the Negro as a race, not simply as the producers of one or two great people or one or two great men. He believed that history was made by he believed that we should focus on the countless Black men and Black women who had contributed to the advancement of human civilization. And this is where Negro History Week appeared. It came across the country, in schools, in churches, and in organizations, community centers all across the country. And this was also happening during the 1920s. What else was going on during the 1920s that helped to put a fire under this movement?
Black Renaissance.
The Black Renaissance, the Harlem Renaissance, right? The Harlem Renaissance is happening. Not only that, but what else is, who else is very influential in the 1920s? Marcus Garvey. And Marcus Garvey was already teaching Black identity and Black empowerment and Universal Negro Improvement Association. So all of this was kind of happening at the same time. And Garvey's movement, I think to this day, is still the largest African-American movement in history, right? A lot of times this movement gets kind of pushed to the side or overshadowed by the civil rights movement, but Marcus Garvey's movement in the UNIA rivaled the civil rights movement by leaps and bounds. And so because of this larger spirit of Black identity and Black culture and Black upliftment, this whole notion of Negro History Week took legs, and it began to appear again in schools and areas all over the country. Then they started having Black History Clubs. So Black History Clubs started to spring up. You had teachers, you had pastors who demanded materials so that they could instruct their pupils. And so the organization that Carter G. Woodson started, ASAALH, was working really hard to send out papers and to send out presentations, and they would write plays, and they would write all kind of creative things to send out to these schools so that they can teach and reproduce African American history. Yes.
I think just some food for thought, if Marcus Garvey had available to him the type of media that was available for the 60s civil rights movement,
Wow.
we might have two Martin Luther Kings going. But you didn't have that type of media then, so a lot of what he did, when you know, the word just didn't get out.
And I would also argue too that I think that maybe the civil rights movement was much more palatable to what white people wanted. You know what I mean? And I think that Garvey's movement was much more radical, much more empowering, and what they would say much more angry, right? Than the civil rights movement. And so maybe even with the media, I don't even know if they probably would have wanted to put them on TV or radio if they had, because I mean the radio existed during that time.
That almost sounds like you're describing Malcolm X.
Sure. Yeah, because the Nation of Islam is very much a continuation of a lot of what Garvey was talking about.
And Malcolm X's parents ended up housing Marcus Garvey on one of his adventures.
Yeah, his dad was a Garveyite. I didn't know that Marcus Garvey stayed in his house, but I know that his dad was very high in the UNIA and in the Garvey organization. So yeah, it was for sure a continuation of that. So here we go. Yeah. So Carter G. Woodson provided study materials, pictures, lessons for teachers, plays, all of these things, posters of important dates and people during Negro History Week. And then in 1937, at the urging of Mary McLeod Bethune, so just to bring this a little closer to home here in the state of Florida, Mary McLeod Bethune established the Negro History Bulletin, which focused on the annual theme of Negro History Week. As the Black population grew, and then mayors started to issue proclamations saying that it was important for schools to support and to promote Negro History Week. And so this movement began to grow over time, and the idea of celebrating Black history and culture began to grow over time. Now, Woodson believed that the weekly celebrations, not the study or the celebration of Black history, he believed that, he did not believe that it would come to an end, but in fact, Woodson never viewed Black history as just a one-week event. So just like we don't necessarily see Black History Month as just a one-month affair, he never said, okay, we can study it for 1 week and then that's it. He always thought that this was just the start of something greater and of something more. And so he had spoke, even before he died in 1950, he said that there should be a shift from Negro History Week to Negro History Year. So not just month, not just 6 months. He said we need to have a whole year where we celebrate who we are. And where we celebrate every day, every year, all the time. Right? And so he said this even back then. And like I was saying earlier, in the 1940s, their efforts began again very slowly within the Black community to expand the study of history of the schools and the history of these celebrations from 1 week to 1 month. One early beneficiary of the movement reported that his teacher would hide Carter G. Woodson's textbooks under his desk to avoid drawing the wrath of the principal. So they would take Carter G. Woodson's books, hide them under the desk, and then when the principal left, they would take them out and continue to study and teach their students Black history. Freedom schools started popping up all over the country. Is anybody familiar with freedom schools? Freedom schools? Yes.
I feel like someone here said that they taught him when they're like, there's someone from one.
They said they taught in freedom school?
I don't know if they taught him when or if like, he wrote a book, so I gotta.
I think I know the brother you're talking about. Yeah, they have freedom schools here, I believe in Jacksonville. Yeah. Right? They have some that's still running today in Jacksonville. I remember when I was in college every summer, some of my friends, to make money, they would go to different freedom schools all over the country and they would teach at these schools that again started in the middle part of the 1900s of the 20th century, and basically they were put in place as independent schools to teach Black children. Yes.
I do want to mention the extension of the creating schools that you mentioned.
Yes.
Cafe Resistance is actually a renaissance of read articles about the Black bookstores
Yes.
of the 1960s. And in that bookstore, I referenced earlier about the Drum and Spear Press, centers where our people would be taught various kinds of history about ourselves. The Black bookstore has been also an extension of the freedom schools that you mentioned, of gathering spaces, Harambe spaces, I guess, where we're talking amongst ourselves about our history and what we want to do.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, from the freedom schools to independent schools, African independent schools that was initiated by the Black Panther Party, all the way up until that movement in the 1980s and 90s, where you had small independent schools, and even now, all of this came out of this freedom school movement. All of this came out of these movements where in the 1930s and 40s, Black folks were creating their own schools, own cafes, own spaces where we could maintain and teach our history. So what we're doing now is just a continuation of that. The reason why we have this space and the reason why we do this every 2 weeks is because we still to this day are battling miseducation, right? We're battling miseducation because, but it didn't just start today. They were battling miseducation in the 1930s. Throughout the 30s, Negro History Week countered the growing myth of the South's lost cause, which argued that enslaved people had been well treated, that the Civil War was a war of Northern aggression, and that Black people had been what? Better off under slavery, right? This is something that, again, they're teaching now, but they've been saying this since the 1930s. Oh, well, they were better off then. They actually enjoyed it. Look at what they're doing now. Here they're going into these churches and they're yelling and screaming and they're praising God and they're happy and they're joyful. They must enjoy picking that cotton 24 out of 25 hours a day, 25 out of 24 hours a day.
They will make America great again.
Right. And so they've been saying this for a long time. They've been saying this for almost 100 years. And Woodson wrote, when you control a man's thinking, you do not have to worry about his actions. You do not have to tell him not to stand here or go yonder. He will find his proper place and he will stay in it. If you don't know who you are, if you don't know where you come from, Carter G Woodson said, you don't have to tell that Black man or that Black woman to go through the back door. They'll go on their own. And if there is no back door, what did he say they're going to do? He said they'll make one and go through the back door themselves because they don't know who they are.
It's like DeSantis talking about how do you put it that or not he specifically, but the changing of the education system here in Florida. They were talking about how Black people learned skills that were beneficial. I forget the exact phrasing. They were saying that what we did in slavery or what they did in slavery was helping them to better their own lives.
Skills, right, that we use today. Absolutely, yeah.
To follow up on what this gentleman said, it's already becoming, and what you have on the screen there, it's already becoming part of the curriculum in Florida and in Jacksonville, because at some of the school board meetings, you had the Moms for Liberty that were pushing that cartoon that DeSantis wants distributed to all school systems in Florida, where and they quote Frederick Douglass from the What is the 4th of July to a Slave? That's where he mentioned that he talked about the fact that slaves had skills, carpentry, blacksmith, a whole bunch of things. He didn't necessarily say that slavery taught it to them, but they had those skills. They used that line to say, okay, some good things came out of slavery. And in that cartoon, you can pull it up on YouTube, they have a character that's kind of a conquistador type character that says, Well, better to be a slave than to be dead. You know, I'm sitting up here, I said, this is what's going on with me. I'm like, oh man.
And that's not what our people said on the Middle Passage. Right. Many of them chose death over enslavement. Many of them threw their kids over. Many of them believed in the afterlife. So they said, you know what, we're gonna hurry up and get them, because this has got to be better than what's happening to us now.
Right.
So absolutely.
I was gonna say many slaves committed suicide.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Just like it's all shit.
Some and then others just took over the ships and turned the ship around and went back. Right? But again, we have to teach our own history. We have to teach it in a way that is empowering, so that we are not just always told that we enjoy slavery, or that this or that even this is where we start. Right? This is why for this class we start all the way in Africa. And we trace it all the way. We tell our full and our complete story so that we know who we are, right? So the study of Negro history, or the celebration of Negro History Week, continued to happen all the way up until around 1969, when Kent State University's Black United Students Organization, with the support from educators on campus, they started to advocate for the entire month of February, to be commemorated as Black History Month. Now again, this was already celebrated as Negro History Month, all the way going back to the 1940s, but it wasn't popular, right? It was just in certain schools and certain communities they were doing that. But here at Kent State University, this is right around the time of the Black Power movement. The Black Panther Party is still very popular during this time. And so it was during this time that Kent State is saying, hey, we don't want to just celebrate a week anymore. We want to celebrate a whole month. And so this was the first observance of Black History Month at Kent State in 1970. And so they continued to celebrate it for an entire month at Kent State University, and every year it expanded further and further and further, and more people started celebrating Black History Month, until finally 6 years later, in 1976, President Gerald Ford formally established February as Black History Month and designated Black History Month about 26 years or 36 years after we were already doing it. They decided that February would be Black History Month. And so, again, as early as the 1940s, Blacks in West Virginia were already celebrating Negro History Month, and celebrated February as Negro History Month. Chicago, a now forgotten cultural activist named Frederick Hammurabi started celebrating Negro History Month in the mid-1960s. And then by the late 1960s, the Civil Rights Movement and the growing Black Power movement and the awareness of Black identity moved Negro History Week into Black History Month on college campuses around the country. And since the mid-1970s, not only, I can't remember what party Gerald Ford belonged to, or whoever party he belonged to, as well as the opposite party, issued the proclamation endorsing the association's annual theme of Black History Month. And from there, we start to see that month and that celebration continue. In 1986, Congress passed a public law which designated February as National Black Afro-American History Month. And then we continue to go on. President Reagan did something similar. He said that the foremost purpose of Black History Month is to make all Americans aware of the struggle for freedom and equal opportunity. And then eventually, Bill Clinton issued an annual proclamation for National Black History Month. And that has been going on in the United States since.
Ford was a Republican.
Oh, Ford was a
Republican because he came in after Nixon stepped down.
Okay, yeah. So Ford, Republican, and Democrats at that time supported this idea of February being officially Black History Month. Also wanted to talk about the attack on Black History Month, right? In 2025, the Defense Intelligence Agency canceled internal celebrations of Black History Month just last year. I'm sure we all remember that from what we saw on social media and on the media, and other special observances due to the second Trump administration's efforts to stop diversity, equity, and inclusion. However, at the start of February, President Donald Trump signed a proclamation honoring National Black History Month. So he tried to take it away, and then he saw that wasn't gonna work. So he put it back. It ain't his to take away, it's only his to put back. He ain't do nothing with it. You know, but there has consistently been this attack from the beginning all the way until now. So we can't take it for granted that we have this. We can't take it for granted that we can celebrate this. We have to continue to fight for it. We have to continue to speak up for our month and for our culture and for our history, whether it's celebrated on the mainstream level or not.
The Defense Intelligence Agency, I'm not familiar with that.
I'm not either. I think it's something that was made up. Just like that. What's the other agency you just made up? Is it CORE or something?
Space Force?
No, not Doja. Is it Doja?
Goes, for Elon Musk at the head.
Yeah, he made up. It was some
Made up the
agency.
War Department, which is actually the Department of Defense.
Yeah. So yes.
If I could, I'd like to make just piggyback maybe on the lady's comment down from me. When she was saying that, well, she to understand that there were a number of Africans on the continent that did not consider Black people in the United States to be African. And the reason why I wanted to just piggyback on that is because I think there's vast differences in the initial mindset right now of people who live in whatever we would consider to be West Africa now, and people who are in Southern Africa. And I say that because I'm going to hark back on that picture you showed at Kent State where we talked about the Black United Student Group 1969. So we know that in Southern Africa, the word Black is used all the time because many of these countries in Southern Africa, whether it be Namibia, South Africa, Zambia, people often use the term Black because they were a part of racial apartheid, like experience in the United States under Jim Crow. So actually, the Black people in the United States making the case to people in Southern Africa would immediately have more of a connectedness because people are using Black and understand what apartheid is, understand what Black is in the political sense as Black is used here, where in West Africa, those people are kind of coming around, don't have that experience, and a lot of Black people figure, oh, well, you know, I'm from Ghana, ancestors from Nigeria, but they may think they're from there or maybe from there, but today they have much more in common with people from Southern Africa who identify as Black, who are part of white settler colonies. And just truth be told, even Angola, which is really where a huge bulk of the Black people are from, in Angola, which is Southern Africa today, but was West Africa 500 years ago on the Lower Guinea coast. In fact, just last year, in the dying days of the Biden administration, you all can go to YouTube and find this out and see it, the articles. Biden was speaking at the enslavement or the slavery museum in Rwanda, Angola. And he referenced a lady from Virginia and his family, Tucker family, as these people from Virginia are Angolans. and they're coming back home. And these are where the bulk of the black people are from this place. And this place, Angola, is the place that spawned a lot of the so-called African culture in the United States. So I think we would have a better engagement about what black means, what African means, with people today who reference their history in that regard. And one thing I would like to say is I think, unfortunately, the missed opportunity, I wish that some of the black law firms here could have helped defend Namibia, who was trying to get reparations from Germany. Just 4 years ago, the government of Namibia was fighting the German government for reparations and for acknowledgement that Germany committed genocide in Southwest Africa in 1905. Guess where? In a court in Manhattan, New Jersey, Manhattan, New York. Fighting the German government in New York City on supposedly a neutral territory. Wouldn't it have been a great optic if black law firms had stood with the Namibian people for reparations with Germany? Because after all, the German genocide was no different than the rest of these colonizers in Donald Trump's people from Germany. It's no different. Yeah. So helping with them would have actually solidified that we are African people standing with other Africans, no different than the difference in the space and time, because we have the same colonizer, the same brutality that has happened, no matter where it happens in the world, it's still happening to African people.
Yeah. And Dr. King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to what?
Justice everywhere.
Threat to justice everywhere, right? And what I think is important is, particularly when we talk about a threat to black people anywhere, right? Regardless of where they are in the diaspora, is something that we should hold to take seriously and should affect each and every one of us, regardless of our identity. But that is extremely important. I'm glad you mentioned that. One of the things I want to talk about as we wrap up is how this idea of Black history or Black History Month and the celebration of Black history, how it has actually impacted us all around the world, right? So in the United Kingdom, in 1987, this was the first time they celebrated Black History Month. And then in 1990, Germany caught on, and members of the Black German community started to observe Black History Month. In 1979, Canada jumped on board and proclaimed, and Black History Month was first proclaimed by the city of Toronto in 1979. On the island of Jamaica, February is set aside as the time where Jamaicans focus their attention on reggae artists. So that marks Reggae Month. Also, in addition to Black History Month, where they honor Bob Marley, Dennis Brown, and other reggae artists. The Republic of Ireland in 2010 started to initiate Black History Month. And then in 2018, finally France got on board and started to celebrate Black History Month in France. So this is just to show that this notion of celebrating and preserving Black history and Black culture is not just an American thing, or not just something that we are doing here in the US, but it is spreading all over the world. In 2020, Black History Month was celebrated in 7 African countries. For the first time, the event was initiated by the organization Africa Mondo, founded by Malina Seymour. Starting in 2021, and African History Month was celebrated in March. So again, all the way to the motherland and all over, people have been celebrating Black History Month. I think I may go back to that question real quick, but I also wanted to take the time, I think you mentioned it earlier, that in talking about Black History Month, today is the day that Malcolm X was assassinated. And Malcolm X joined, as you say, brother, joined the ancestors on February 21st, 1965. So just in talking about Black History Month, actually what February 21st, 1965 was the day that he was infamously assassinated at the Audubon Ballroom in Harlem, New York. And so just a couple of key people that we can talk about. Bayard Rustin, civil rights, close advisor to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., civil rights activist who helped to organize the March on Washington. Jesse Owens, a famous track and field athlete, four-time gold medalist who defeated the Germans in the 1936 Olympics, right around the height of the Nazi Germany regime. Zora Neale Hurston, who has strong ties right here in Jacksonville, Florida, lived in Jacksonville, Florida for about a decade or two, is considered to be one of the foremost authors and anthropologists in America, and who still has yet to really get her just due. We're writing an article about this at UNF, me and a couple colleagues, about Jacksonville's continued forgetting history of Zora Neale Hurston, and how we have not, as a city, have not acknowledged Zora Neale Hurston as we should have. And so that'll be coming soon. Of course, people in literature, James Baldwin, Alma Thomas, Miles Davis, and many others, just folks who have done amazing work and have influenced Black American history and culture. One of the things I wanted to talk about, somebody asked me this question, and I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on it. It's a little controversial, but why not? This past week, Jesse Jackson passed away, right? He was, 84, 85. And somebody raised this question. Some people said that Jesse Jackson was to Dr. King what Minister Farrakhan was to Malcolm X. And this kind of got my brain to thinking and my mind to going. And I said, well, let me bring this to the class and see how if they see a connection between these two relationships, or if they disagree, right? If they don't see a connection between these two relationships. Anybody have thoughts on that?
I don't see no connection.
Okay.
Louis Farrakhan, when Malcolm X left the nation, the newspaper that put out every week, they was making articles about killing Malcolm X, like literally pictures with his head rolled, getting chopped off. Jesse wasn't blatantly saying kill Malcolm off, all that crazy stuff. I think that's totally different.
Okay. Anybody else?
There are no perfect messages, but there are imperfect people that do beneficial things for our people. In both cases, I think that falls into place. Because neither one of them were perfect. They may have their disputes amongst one another, may have had their falling out or whatever. But more importantly, what's the legacy that they left behind? And we can benefit from now going forward.
Anybody else? Any other thoughts on this?
Little bit, like not exactly. It's ironic.
I don't believe in that little bit. I just don't believe it.
It's ironic that you would bring up Reverend Jackson, because when it was mentioned by a couple of people about the ASAALH movement and the FBA movement, did anybody know there's a social media movement to castigate Reverend Jackson for popularizing the term African American? There are Black people who are saying that Reverend Jackson was traitor by popularized the term African American because what it did was it took the black people in the United States and made them falsely think they were African, so that other people could take advantage of black people in the United States with regard to DEI and other sorts of things. And this is harks back to what I said about these movements, these white supremacy movements, down to even castigating people like Reverend Jackson. Go on social media and see how Reverend Jackson is being castigated because he popularized this term African American, and that they are glad that his voice is no longer around this, and that, like him, fading to the wind, the term African American should do so also. Hope people are aware.
Anybody thinking like that is crazy because we ain't gonna be able to do it by ourselves. We gonna need them, they gonna need us.
But again, this is the time to be believing with some social media, though. Like even the first 500 comments that you read could be bots. You feel me? Like, and not just could be bots. Like
They are.
I'm about to say, you're seeing it. More than likely, there's money behind it. There's money behind it. More than likely, it's either Democratic or Republican money behind it. Like literally, you feel me? Like almost every right. You know, so there's a lot. There's a lot more. So okay, around 2021, they started trying to figure out how much money was being put behind like each post in terms of commercials, in terms of social branding, and they found out that China was funding like 70% of posts on social media. You feel me? Like they found this out in 2021, and they didn't tell them to stop. You know, they didn't tell them to slow down. They didn't put no tariffs on them. You feel me? Like
They told them to turn it up some more.
Yeah, you feel me? They're like, oh, okay, well we'll compete with them. You know, so. Yeah, right now, this isn't the time to just read something on social media and think that reality reflects it.
Yeah.
This ain't the time. You know?
That's where your hands are connected.
The term African American and Afro American, he might have popularized, but he wasn't the first historical documents and writings that very early.
Yeah, I mean, even when you think about the Black National Anthem, written by James Jordan Johnson right here in Jacksonville, Florida, at Bethel Baptist Church, the very last line is what? True to what? True to our God, true to our native land, right? That clearly shows that yes, we have a hit in the Black American, African American national anthem. At the very last line, James Jordan Johnson strategically pays tribute to our native land, Africa. So there has been, for many of our people, many of our leaders and influential people, this connection, right, to Africa. Yes.
Let me just be honest, in my studies, I've actually skipped Jesse Jackson. Not on purpose, but just, I skipped it. Okay. So could you kind of fill me in on Jesse Jackson? And when I read Louis Farrakhan and Malcolm X, I kind of think of the father figure role that Louis played. Is Louis Farrakhan? Louis Farrakhan. Okay. I think of the I don't want to say father role, but that
Darth Vader role, basically.
Yeah, Minister Farrakhan was a student. He called himself a student of Malcolm.
His name was Louis X first.
Louis X. And then Louis Farrakhan, he was a student of Malcolm X. Malcolm X was his teacher. Yeah, Malcolm X was his teacher. And in the same kind of conversation, Jesse Jackson was a student of the civil rights movement. He joined, he was extremely young. I think maybe he might be in his 20s, maybe at the time, when he began to rise and play a role in the civil rights movement. And after there are different videos and thoughts about Jesse Jackson's connection to Dr. King all the way up until he was assassinated. Some people say that he was the successor and he was supposed to take up the mantle after Dr. King. Other people say that he aided and abetted in Dr. King's assassination. So there are all different types of theories. After Dr. King was assassinated, Jesse Jackson began to rise, particularly in the Democratic Party. He aligned himself with many government officials and got funding for, I think it was like Operation Breadbasket, the Rainbow Push Coalition, and he began to make a name for himself in the political realm, where you have folks like John Lewis and others who did a lot of work on the city level and became mayors. Andrew Young became the mayor of Atlanta. Congressman John Lewis became a congressman, and then Jesse Jackson eventually in the 1980s really started to become popular nationally when he ran for president, and he became the first black man to make a significant mark in being a Democratic candidate for presidency in the 1980s. And then 1987, I believe, was when it was a conference in Chicago when he famously said that black people were no longer black anymore or Negro or colored, but now we were calling ourselves African American. And since 1987, the identity of the name African American began to spread across, our community and throughout. And that's how many people started to adopt the term African American through the influence of Jesse Jackson. So those are just a couple of things that he kind of did to make a name for himself and why many people herald him as a significant figure in American history and Black history.
Now, I had always heard, well, not a whole lot, but I had heard rumors that Farrakhan may have been in on the assassination of Malcolm X. At the same time with Jesse Jackson, as I grew up watching, he was the leader of Operation Push, People United to Save Humanity, and he was always good with coming up with phrases. I am somebody. I may be poor, but I am somebody. I may be homeless, but I am somebody. And from time to time, he would either call for boycotts or threaten boycotts in Chicago with various things, and he started developing his political power from that. And he had some charisma about him, and from that pulpit at Operation Push, it expanded.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I do want to say one thing that I think that will link Minister Farrakhan and Reverend Jackson is the fact that the history books will show that Minister Farrakhan had the fruit of his home to protect Reverend Jackson's life when he ran for president.
I knew the fruit protected Dr. King. I didn't know that they protected.
Yeah, and that Reverend Jackson was being pushed to denounce Minister Farrakhan. And I think, to Reverend Jackson's credit, he did not reject Minister Farrakhan. In fact, a white news reporter said something about, the Nation of Islam was, protecting the security of Reverend Jackson's life. And whoever the news reporter, the national news, was saying, well, Reverend Jackson will be less than the person to condemn the person that would have his security forces to protect his life. So in that end, I have to give Reverend Jackson credit in that end. In any case, but also, I'd like to say that we're doing some news clips that I think Reverend Jackson, represented the Black world and was a great African politically who spoke out for African people. And a classic video that I think people should see if they haven't already, when Reverend Jackson was debating white loyalist evangelical Jerry Falwell on Nightline with Ted Koppel. It was a great hour debate over South Africa and apartheid. You should look at that video. It's an hour long on Nightline. Reverend Jackson debating Jerry Falwell with Ted Koppel being the host.
Absolutely. Oh, go ahead.
My brother was one of the FOIT to help do security around that time when he was running. The president was on the pushback one for Mr. Farrakhan. The daughters now have like a $300 million lawsuit. This is the New York Police Department, and unsealed files show that there were, and also admission that there were infiltrators in both organizations. But there was infiltrators even up to the day that Malcolm was killed on stage. One of the men that rushed to him was an undercover police officer.
Mexican looking dude, look like he Latino or something.
Yeah, but they have unsealed some of the files, and there was a lot of infiltration, especially in the Nation of Islam.
Oh, absolutely.
Especially here, and they tried to play it up because of the stupid invasion that Farrakhan has something to do with, which he did agree that he spewed out harmful words that could have attributed to people's mindset going after Malcolm, but he had his hand where he had anything for the tribute.
For sure, yeah.
On the topic of Minister Farrakhan, again, I think I just started real far behind, and so now I'm like catching up to the modern times, doing my own research. I just recently, as of like last week, even started listening to Minister Farrakhan. What is I can hear some of it when I listen to the debates and whatnot. But what is America's issue with Farrakhan on a large scale? And don't get me wrong, I can see some of it already.
Strong powerful black man.
Just a little bit. It's like 7 ladies below Gaddafi.
America had an issue with, and not just Farrakhan, Elijah Muhammad, and Malcolm and the Nation, particularly the Nation post like 1957, for a while. But I think honestly, Farrakhan, number one, Farrakhan has been labeled anti-Semitic, right? For his criticism of Israel, particularly Israel and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict that's been going on for a long time. He's vocally a black separatist and believe that black people should have a separate nation, which again goes against these kind of democratic ideals that America likes to push forward, supported and bolstered by black movements like the Civil Rights Movement, ideas around economic, black people having their own economic base, their own land base. That type of economic empowerment is not something that America wants any group, let alone black people, to be able to have, even with the type of liberation, rise of consciousness, and different things like Black Lives Matter movement. The United States always wants black people and African people as a whole to be dependent upon her, right? And Farrakhan and many people within the resistance part of our struggle have always understood that a real freedom for black folks comes when we empower ourselves and when we get our power from nations that look like us and people that look like us. And so Farrakhan has always kind of taught that. So that has always been another issue that America has had with, the U.S. has had with Farrakhan. And I'm sure they can't wait till he passes away, but it don't look like, even though he's I think in his 90s, like late 80s, it don't look like he's going 90, he ain't look like he's going nowhere no time soon. If not eating that pork, you'll help him live long.
He just put up a mirror against America, and they will.
Right.
And historical will things they try to whitewash and glorify and romanticize. He just put up a mirror against what they've done to black people. Not only black people, continent of humanity all over the world, powerful nations. And they battle for like, countries to do. So we just put up a mirror, and then putting up that mirror, he wanted to push us to realize the full potential in black people we have. It allowed us to speak more, and that's one thing I think he doesn't want to this day. So that's the issue. That's the issue.
And like I said, I'm learning, but I've only had the chance to watch 4 of his kind of lessons.
Yeah, no problem, no problem. I wanted to,
People forget about Chairman Fred Hampton. He started the Rainbow Coalition before Jesse Jackson in Chicago.
That's true.
With the Young Lawyers and the Young Patriots.
Yeah,
white,
yeah.
Latino, and black.
Absolutely.
And he was assassinated December 4th.
Yeah, that whole, right there in Chicago, Jesse, that whole push, you're absolutely right, came from Chairman Hampton having an interracial and an interclass movement that the Chicago police and the FBI was like, yeah, that's not gonna work. We'll let y'all black people holler, hoot, and fight all y'all want to. But y'all try to pull in poor white people, y'all try to pull in Hispanic people, we can't have it. And that was one of the reasons he was assassinated. So, all right, I'm over time, but I just want to say again, happy 100 years of Black History. We do have a cake right over here. So, go ahead and come get some cake. Also, everybody gets one free item off the Cafe Resistance menu, from ASAALH Institute, just to say thank you all for being here and again celebrating happy 100 years of Black history.
Thank you.
Thanks again for your insight. I just wanted to make mention to everybody. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, I think, gave very insightful and excellent, in quotes, speech in Munich, Germany, which you all can go on YouTube and watch, because he outlined what America is, what an American is. Doesn't include anybody in this room, but he talked about what it is, what those things mean. And to sum up, he said that America will always just be a child of Europe. So Europeans and Americans should just intertwine themselves now and into the future and not look at language or other sorts of things. And just see themselves as people of Western civilization as they reset themselves to launch into the future with all kinds of resources that are needed for their survival on this planet. Now, you all go to YouTube and check that out. A lot of analysis has been done on that. But I think it's clear what he's saying, what the MAGA movement is saying, and what white people are saying in the United States. And it doesn't involve us. Maybe we need to plot a new course and thinking and action about what we should do in response to the realism of what they're saying about themselves. Yeah, Munich, Germany. Did you see that? Just 4 years ago, they were in court and had to fighting Germany against reparations and trying to get Germany to admit to genocide against the Naramo people in Southwest Africa. They lost the case in Manhattan. They lost the case, but Germany admitted to atrocities being done. And from there, Germany said they would invest heavily into Libya, but they never confessed to genocide.
I'll be here. I can.
Feel free to get a plate.
You first, Mr.
Everybody get a picture? I know some people want to get a picture before.
Yeah, I got one. I just sent you. Yeah, my yeah. I was already here.
No, but I'm originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I live in Georgia. I live in Mississippi.
You can get in and mess it up.
What you gonna do? I thought you were getting something for yourself.
No, I'm getting
Oh,
I didn't set anything up last week, but I started trying to figure out who wanted to do it Excuse me, everybody. Real quick on the topic of that book club that I talked about a couple weeks back. I didn't set it up yet because I didn't know if we wanted to stay here longer, do another hour after this. We wanted to do it on the opposite Saturday, maybe an hour before this. I'd have to get with Cafe Resistance, see what their schedule is like, but I kind of want to get a group consensus. Do we want to stay longer for the book club or set it on the opposite day? Anybody have an opinion on that?
I think the opposite day.
Did you get the email list that I sent you? Okay, so what you might do is send out maybe like a listserv, not a listserv, but what do you call it?
Survey?
Survey, yeah, survey monkey, create one of those, and then see when people are available. Yeah, survey monkey.
You're gonna try to meet once a month, twice a month?
I would like to do that. Especially for that program. Especially for that book in particular. It hits me hard. I feel like I can only read so many chapters before I just gotta sit down for a while.
Sure. Or as a man told me, he said, just try to do 2 pages a day. So you gotta go to the toilet while you're sitting there, do 2 pages.
It's not the reading part. It's like realization, understanding what you're saying. It hits me. It hits the heart. I usually just sit with it, kind of like, that sucks.
Now you're asking about schedules. I'm almost of the mind to maybe meet before this week.
Because we have the mentorship, the boys mentorship from 10 to 12.
Oh, okay.
And then from 12 to 1 is
How often do they meet?
I think it's on the same schedule.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yes, the boys mentorship.
They meet here? No, I knew they had talked about that, but then I didn't know more about it.
We got to sit down with them in a kind of circle and just talk about their, what they want to do.
How old are they?
I'm 27.
No, I mean, how old are they?
Oh, kid, I think the youngest one is 14. I want to say the oldest is 17.
Oh, okay. That's the right age. That's a good age.
Talking about peer pressure and things like that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that is a well-made cake. Don't mind saying that's a well-made cake.
I normally don't like it. I don't eat stuff like this a lot. It's good.
Now looking at your physique and my physique, I don't need to be eating none of this. So here's what I'm going to do. More than that, I follow the philosophy of food should not be wasted. So I'm going to help make sure that this don't go to waste. That is a sin. Wasting food is a sin.
Take one back to one.
I just, yeah. Take one? Yeah, I'm gonna do the same thing.
If you haven't tasted it, is it good?
Man, I got what you know. No, I got it. It was tasting so good. I was gonna slap you upside the head. And I said, I better calm down. I better calm down. That's a good kick. They jumped in that with both feet. Yeah. Both feet and foot.
Take as much as you can. I ain't taking all that. Have you died? Don't forget, if this is your first time signing in sheet, so you can get on our email list.
What was this to?
It's the strong
Live?